Good to be joined by Connor Tomlinson. Although, regrettably, under these circumstances, I can't even imagine what it must be, what it must feel like day to day to witness your country falling into such ruin under the auspices of both your liberal and conservative governments, treating you with such disdain.
Yeah, there's a never-ending procession of atrocities in my country, Tony. The most egregious one, of course, that has shocked everyone in the last couple of days or so was the murder of Henry Nowak, and even more egregiously was the police response, where he uttered the words made immortal on your side of the pond by George Floyd, "I can't breathe." Now, of course, there's going to be lots of police officers who hear those words these days and think, right, you're just having us on. You're uttering the words that are the get out of jail free card. But no, Henry Nowak was drowning to death in his own blood because a sneak man had stuck an 8-inch blade into his lung, slashed the back of his legs, also cut his face and delivered another injury to him. And he was dying in police custody, but the police handcuffed him instead because his attacker and his broader clan family were on scene, lied to the police, and decided to accuse Henry Nowak of racism. And the police cared more about the hurt feelings of his killer, because he is not British, he's of immigrant descent, than they did about Henry's fatal wounds. And so he died in custody. And the last thing that young lad heard was the police reading him his rights with complete callous indifference to his suffering.
You say this has shocked a lot of people. This has shocked a lot of people on your island, but of course, I don't believe that it's as shocking to some of you who have watched your country be turned into this social experiment. I can't say gone wrong, rather gone right. It is going exactly as intended. And I'm beyond incensed when I see the response, and appropriately so, from Nigel Farage, for instance, pointing out that, yes, and in fact, the indigenous people to the Isle of Britain might just, in fact, have some kind of rights to exist without being harassed and slaughtered and butchered and raped by third world immigrant culture. As you accurately pointed out, it's not just jihadi Islamic culture, it is third world mass migration culture. And it is something here on our side of the pond, as you pointed out, that we see people desperately saying the United States needs to become just like the old left and right, as it were, in the UK with the Labour and Conservative governments, going so hell-bent on this unlimited migrant fiasco that I'm surprised that there is as much outrage as there was, because isn't this something that you folks on the British Islands might have been expecting at this point?
So to pick up on a few things there, you're right in that this is the inevitable consequence of a social experiment that was inflicted upon us despite the British public voting against immigration whenever it was on offer in every election since 1974. And we have had instead record levels of just replacement migration imposed on us anyway. To get a scale of the problem for your audience,
please.
We are a country the size of New York State, and we have the same level of legal migration that America does every year. We have had
Hang on. The size of New York State, and I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt, but that's so huge, to gloss over it would be criminal. The size of New York State, but has the immigration annually of the entire United States by gross. That's insane.
We have legal immigration running about 1 million a year. It was 6 million immigrants in 6 years between 2020 and 2026. And that's not counting illegals.
Goodness.
With which we've had a few 100,000 sneak in on the back of a lorry or cross via small boat, using smuggling gangs that, by the way, secretly film British women and girls on nights out on university campuses and market them essentially as the prize of sex tourism for men from Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. The government knew that was going on, by the way, back in 2023. It's still going on today. And when I exposed it, the government did nothing. So they know this is happening.
Hey now. I mean, you might actually get some of those guys who do commit the rapes to get a fine of what, 20 quid, something like that. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing.
Well, a lot of sex offenders actually don't face jail time in this country. Many of the Pakistani rape gang perpetrators get quite short sentences. Some of them who were convicted in 2013 have actually been released rather than deported, and they've actually encountered their victims in supermarkets, in nightclubs. Some of them have gotten work as delivery drivers, a bit like DoorDash in the US, and have delivered food to their victims' houses unannounced. So this has been going on for decades, and it is by design, because Tony Blair in 1997 became prime minister under New Labour, and immigration thanks to Tony Blair, since 1997 has been greater than the entirety of immigration to Britain between the Norman conquest in 1066 and the Second World War concluding in 1945. And one of Blair's speechwriters, a man named Andrew Neville, said this was the express purpose of the policy, quote, to rub the right's nose in diversity and render its arguments out of date. Well, consider our nose is well and truly rubbed off. I think the family of Henry Nowak's nose feels pretty rubbed off right about now. The other day, we just had a hearing in Parliament based on the Pakistani rape gangs. Rupert Lowe was formerly in Nigel Farage's party. Nigel unfortunately expelled Rupert because Rupert said he wanted to deport the families that had not just committed the crimes but covered it up, and Nigel Farage thought that was beyond the pale. So Nigel's deputy called the police on Rupert Lowe, filed a false police report against him. Nigel's saying very good things now, don't get me wrong, but that was disgraceful at the time. Rupert kept his promise and privately funded an inquiry into these rape gangs who have tortured, trafficked, drugged, even murdered thousands of girls. One girl, Charlene Downs in Blackpool, her body's never been found because her alleged killers were caught on a recording laughing about mincing her body into kebab meat and selling it. They never got prosecuted because the police mishandled the evidence, and so the jury couldn't reach a verdict. Rupert held an inquiry into this, and he spent 6 minutes in Parliament reading out the testimonies of these girls. And I advise everyone go and watch it. It's on X, it's on YouTube.
We'll include the link in the description.
Some of these stories are just the most harrowing things you've ever heard. Like girls being trafficked in dog cages. One girl was raped by a dog, and that's not even the worst of it that I've heard. And after he concluded that, you had MPs from the Labour Party, from the Liberal Democrats, and independent Muslim MPs get up and say, actually, white men are to blame. We shouldn't narrow the focus of the debate by just talking about the grooming gangs. We should talk about all abuse, which means you don't want to focus on it. It's actually Islamophobic and racist to talk about this. And the worst one was this Liberal Democrat and MP who got up and said, you only care about this because you're making money, Rupert, on Elon Musk's X. And Elon Musk only cares about this because of his apartheid nostalgic white supremacism. So these MPs are willing to grandstand on the grave of Henry Nowak, atop the mountain of skulls that have been stacked by multiculturalism, the girls that have been sacrificed on the altar of progressivism. They're willing to stand up there and castigate you and I for talking about it and trying to solve the problem, Rupert Lowe, Elon Musk, even Nigel Farage, but not actually address the problem themselves. And all of those people will be remembered as traitors in the years to come when we eventually fix this problem.
And this is something that I talk about with my audience quite often, is that there is, people say, well, is the UK lost? I said, I don't think so. I do believe that there is going to be a point where there is going to be a throwing out of those who have caused these kinds of problems. And unfortunately, because of the scale of the violence, the scale and the wanton manner of the indifference that's been bantered about, and notwithstanding, to make Henry Nowak's murder about not using Henry Nowak's murder. Like, that's become the story. How dare you use his family wouldn't, their family wouldn't. We need to just stop. All lives matter kind of a nonsense is the conservative parliament leader pointed out like a numpty. When I glance at the headlines and the outrage from your parliament, not at those who have committed these atrocities, but the outrage against those who are suggesting enough is enough, I am. It's beyond concern. It's a moral disgust that just won't leave my stomach to see adults acting this way to their countrymen. I mean, just acting this way to human beings in general. To suggest that it's worthwhile to sacrifice, these thousands of girls so that we can pretend, as Tony Blair suggested, that we are globally compassionate. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's classic denial, deflection, reversal, obfuscation tactics, where we're talking about the people talking about the problem rather than the problem itself. Earlier, you said Nigel Farage issued a statement addressing the nation, talking about anti-white racism, and I think this is the moment that Nigel Farage has actually won the next election, whether it's called now or eventually. And I say that again as very supportive of Rupert Lowe's efforts, but I think the media circus surrounding Nigel Farage's comments about Henry Nowak's murder has discredited every other party that
Correct.
is within a
and they have absolutely. And
Yep.
we have that kind of thing here in the United States as well, where there will be an individual in a political fashion, for example, on the right side of the aisle, that will do something that I strongly disagree with, but then will kind of find their moment a couple of days or weeks later. That is the murky and unfortunate mire of politics that's frustrating. And I sympathize with that. I understand the annoyance of having to kind of clear some of those things up and yet still try to hold accountable for the actions of kicking out Rupert, because God forbid he actually tries to suggest maybe this kind of thing isn't for the country, and then investigates it, in depth. I can't imagine the idea of calling the police on a fellow party member because they say something. Again, forgive me for the, my inability to grasp that lack of freedom of expression just blows my mind to here and gone.
Yeah, and they also confiscated a shotgun, so that's going to be a particularly sore point for your Second Amendment loving viewers,
Of
Tony.
course, because
But
of course.
But the importance of the story is that Nigel Farage is correct. This is an example of anti-white racism. This
Correct.
is an example of discrimination against the native population, terms he wouldn't have spoken about in just the last few months when he used to say that being English is just a feeling. I think this has brought the salience of the indigenous British people. That it's increased their awareness of their own identity, in contrast to imported identities who will gang up against them if they feel they have something to gain. Because what has been revealed by the Henry Nowak case, also the Southport massacre and the subsequent riots that Keir Starmer decided to take to the podium and condemn everyone grieving the loss of those 3 girls murdered by the anti-white African murderer Axel Rudikabala. He condemned them all as far right, the grooming gangs as well. What this has made everyone realize is there is two-tier policing, in that there is one rule for imported tribal minorities who do not have our Christian compassion, who do not have our individualistic morals and manners, who do not think there should be a prohibition against dishonesty. They will lie and cheat and steal so long as it advantages them, their clan, their family, their ethnic in-group, so long as it preserves their ISAT, their social
Honor
standing
versus trust
from
culture
the Indian
stuff.
subcontinent. And there is there is a legally enshrined standard. It's embedded in police training. It has been even before the 2020 Summer of Love and George Floyd exported BLM-style anti-racism to Britain. It's been there since 1999, when the Macpherson report, following the Stephen Lawrence murder, called the police institutionally racist, and the police now go around policing the private thoughts of the public to prove that they aren't racist. What happens now in every institution is that anti-racism is the animating principle of the British state. And so that means that minorities can walk around, they can carry weapons when white people can't. Women can't even carry pepper spray to defend themselves against rape, but Sikhs can carry around daggers with no problem. You will have Muslim rapists who will be able to agitate with their community activist organizations that get invited to Downing Street and that deny the rape gang scandal that goes on. You'll then have Jewish organizations that then, when Rupert Lowe says, well, this is something akin to Britain's version of the Holocaust, they'll talk more about anti-Semitism and point the finger at him rather than all of the Muslims that have been imported that are marching in the streets calling for the death of Jews. So you've got minoritarian grievances ganging up against the native population. And the native population are not only expected to pay for all of this with their taxes, not only expected to pay for all of it in the blood of their children, with Henry Nowak and the girls affected by the rape gangs, but the moment they say, hang on a minute, they see us as white oppressors. And so they are wreaking revenge on us, and they're honest about it. The moment they say that, they're told by Kemi Badenoch, they're told by Keir Starmer, they're told by many figures on the ostensible left and right, well, hang on a minute, you're playing identity politics. You're being divisive. Don't look back in anger. The entire state marshals its forces to gaslight the families and the grieving public, to tell them you shouldn't be angry about the deaths of your children, and you can't play identity politics, but everyone else can successfully and at your expense. I'll tell you what, the British public, whether or not Nigel Farage, I think, understands this, the British public now implicitly know this, and they're willing to play that game. And if they don't win, they know that their children will be the next Henry Nowak.
So that actually leads me to kind of my last question here, and it's a doozy. I mean, there's no way to frame it otherwise. What is the onus on every man, woman, and child in England, in the United Kingdom at large here? What is laid the charge upon their souls to actually take up this cause? What do they need to do? And not just because this isn't going to be a sprint. There is this idea of instant gratification that has gripped all Western cultures, especially since the advent of high-end commercialism, and then of course the end of the Cold War only fueled that. But beyond instant gratification, this is a marathon to run. This is a steady cause that must be taken up. What is the charge that you believe should be laid on every single one of your countrymen? Because it has to be the defining cause of the next generation, lest they end up murdered or raped and then treated as a momentary tabloid piece, if even then those articles will cover such a tragedy.
Yeah, you're right. There's a book by Ernest Gellner called Nations and Nationalism, and he actually outlines the mentality of our ruling elites are the same as those redistricting Eastern Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries, saying, well, actually, genocide, rape, and displacement is kind of the price of balancing our ethnic spreadsheet, so we can tolerate this. I actually don't think we should tolerate our family members being casualty for their utopian project. What should you do? Go out and vote for the furthest right available option that you have that is politically viable in your given constituency. Pressure the parties to strengthen their platform on things like remigration, on our zero tolerance policy for murderous, incompatible foreign cultures.
So not pandering to this assumed middle, being kind of the flip that a lot of political parties will do.
Yeah, stop pandering to minority grievances. I mean, during the local elections, Reform were running foreign nationals as candidates because they didn't want to get called racist. Richard Tice was going around a bit like Pierre Poilievre was in Canada, or Peter Dutton was in Australia, prostrating himself in a Gurdwara. And now that they're saying they're going to ban the Kirpan, ban the exemption for Sikh daggers, people are just, of course, posting the image of him pandering to that minority, thinking, well, do you actually want to lose votes there? So vote for the most credible option, pressure them to enact the policies that are necessary to keep our country safe, to stop us from becoming a hated minority in our own country. I've run the numbers on that, by the way. I've got 2 kids on the way. They're going to be a minority in their own generation in 5 years. It is that bad. We cannot afford to be indifferent about this. And make those political judgments based on character. I've seen a lot of people around the Henry Nowak case, also around the grooming gang case, trying to turn it into a purely partisan issue. And they have said some rather vindictive things about the other side. It's not about your personal gain. It's not even about your respective political party. It's about doing right by the victims. And doing right by them does not mean we all hold a drum circle and don't look back in anger. Doing right by them means we expel the perpetrators. We expel the communities that generate and cover up these crimes, and we shut our doors to those regions of the world that would do us harm forever. And anyone who isn't willing to pledge to that does not deserve your support.
The perpetrators of those actions and cultures must be expelled and banished. There's no, and again, I don't understand. I mean, of course we do understand. We understand quite well why it is that they, that's not exactly how that's framed. But I mean, it's completely clear. And I know that this must sound so shallow again across the pond, and as the world looks on. Connor, I'm so deeply sorry that your country is going through this, that your countrymen, that the families of the United Kingdom must live in this state right now as these pompous, chubby, queerish men act in such, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about Keir Starmer, rant and rave about compassion while wiping their hands of the blood of those that they claim to represent off of their hands and then step into their nice little private estates. I mean, again, I don't know what else I can offer other than that many of us are seeing you, that we're praying for you earnestly. And we hope that God brings justice to the people of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, and then honestly, solidarity, because the same thing is happening in every Anglosphere country and pretty much every white European country. And it's the same culprits. It's the same cultures. It's the same people. And they do not care about your suffering. I mean, one final point, if I may.
Please.
I've seen Indians online celebrate the murder of Henry Nowak and praise his killer, just as they were praising the Sikhs that did the illegal U-turn in Florida and killed a family when they thought that family were white. We know how these people behave. They do not think like us. They do not care about us. They just don't belong here in my country or in yours. So I hope that we achieve the same outcome.
Again, it's so easy to identify the cultures that are incompatible, the actions that emanate from those cultures that are incompatible, and then it becomes far more easy. No ethnic spreadsheeting Eastern European relocationism required. It's just cut and dried. We're not tolerating it here. Nope, not even a no thank you. The answer is no, the gate is shut.
Certainly. That's the only solution.
Connor Tomlinson, thank you for giving us a couple of minutes of your time. Of course, we've got all your stuff linked in the description, also here on the Chiron. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir.